Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I'm Harry Osiris, and this is my grecochess YouTube channel. And in this series of videos, we're going to present the games that I played yesterday, that is August 8th, at the 81st Chessanity tournament. But let's start sharing the announcement of the tournament. It is here. August 8th at the Long Island School for the Gifted in Syosset, New York. And I was participating in the quad. You see here, there are 3 tournaments taking place. The one is the quad, which means 4 players are playing against each other. And there are 2 more, the under 600 or the development ones. And I was among the top 4 listed among the rated players, so I had to face the other 3 top rated players. You see the time control? G40, D5, which means that when the game started, the players had 14 minutes on their clocks, but when it was their time to move the first 5 seconds, the clock would not move. And then it would start to continue going downwards, and players needed to complete all their moves before time went down to 0. There were 3 rounds, as you see, and in round number 1, my opponent was Suriyan Nathan. And let's now go and have a look at my opponent. You see that his rating is 1620, and he's in the 87.4 percentile, which means that out of every 100 members of the United States Chess Federation, 87.4 he's better than 87.4 of them all. To give integer numbers, out of every 1,000 members of the United States Chess Federation, Suresh is better than 874 with his rating of 1620. And let's compare this with my rating. My rating is 1579, and I'm in the 85.9 percentile. What does this mean? It means that he's the slight favorite. His rating is a little bit better than mine. But let's see what actually happened in the game. We're going to the analysis board of chess.com, and we're going to follow the game move by move from the beginning until the end. Once again, a reminder that if 5 or less minutes remain, the players do not need to record their moves any longer because time is very crucial at the last 5 minutes. Suriyan had the white pieces and I had the black pieces. And Suriyan starts with the F pawn. F2 goes to F4. This is what's called the bird opening, if I'm correct. And how to reply? Of course, I cannot push my E pawn because it's going to be captured. It's a book move, yes. And I replied with my D pawn going to D5. Again, a book move. Yes, this is the bird opening Dutch variation, not how it's called. Bird opening because the F pawn goes to F4, and Dutch variation because I'm replying with my D pawn going to D5. Second move for Suriyan, knight goes to F3, and my knight goes to F6. Third move, pawn goes to D3. And now we are out of the quote-unquote book. It's not a literal book. It means out of the moves that I usually played. It's a good move according to the chess.com, not the best one. And I'm starting having a small advantage. And I reply, developing my other knight goes to C6. And Suriyan moves his knight to D2. And I move my bishop to F5. Trying to take control of the center. Now Suriyan wants to fianchetto his bishop. That's why first he moves his pawn to B3. But the computer believes it's a mistake and starts giving me a significant advantage. Why a mistake? I don't think there's anything wrong in this move, but what is wrong is that in the opening, you're supposed not to waste any time, and what you get, meaning the fianchetto bishop, was not worth the 2 moves that you had to spend. I continue my development. My pawn goes to E6. Computer would rather have me put it on e5. I don't want to start calculating. He takes the pawn, I take with the knight, he takes the knight, or whatever else happening. But he attacks the e5 with 1 and 2 squares, and I defend only with the knight. There could be a problem. Yes, I would have to sacrifice a pawn. Look at what the computer says with my best continuation. If I push to e5, knight takes, pawn takes, my knight goes to g4, and the other perhaps other knight would go to f3. I wasn't feeling happy with sacrificing a pawn, even if, of course, I didn't know it at the time, even if it gave me a better advantage, that I would have to think how to exploit. That's why my pawn stayed on e6. Fianchetto continues, bishop goes to b2, and I develop my other bishop goes to d6. Inaccuracy, my computer would rather have it on c5, but on c5, the bishop is unprotected. I would have to be very careful with that. Pawn goes to e3, and I castle kingside. In fact, the only way I could castle. Mistake for the computer, would rather have my queen go to e7. Queen goes to e2 for Suresh, and by now I started thinking of how to attack, because my knight could go to g4 and take the pawn to e3 and attack the queen. And that's why Suriyan is defending against it with queen going to e2. My knight now goes to, oh yes, the computer would rather have the pawn go to h3 and block my knight going to g4. But I'm now trying with the other knight going to b4. And I'm threatening the pawn at c2, check, and fork, and winning the rook. That's why queen goes back to d1. Not a good omen if you have to move the same piece back and forth twice to the same square. Computer would rather have white do a long castling. Until now, I have not won any material, but my position starts becoming better and better. You see, I already have a 2.15 advantage. My other knight now goes to g4. And I have very strong threats. I'm threatening the pawn on e3, and if Suriyan tries to defend it with the queen going to e2, I take the pawn at c2. And Suriyan plays the only move that will save him from losing material immediately. And this is not a move you want to play. King goes to e2. No castling for Suriyan, moving the king. This is what's called the bone cloud or something like that gambit. But still, I need to win the material. Just because I have a better position does not guarantee anything. One careless move and I lose material. And everything is lost. The bishop now goes to c5. I'm attacking the pawn on e3 twice. With the knight and the bishops protected only once the king. And Suriyan once again tries to defend the only way he can. He places his bishop on d4. I exchange. My bishop takes his bishop. Otherwise, my bishop is lost. I will have to put it back or who knows what. It has two ways to take it, either with the knight or with the pawn. And he decides to take it with the pawn. I thought and still think that the knight would be better, because now he's opening this line. And if he put the bishop there, at least he would threaten if he put his knight on d4, at least he would threaten my bishop, and he would overprotect the pawn at c2. The queen now goes to d6 and attacks the pawn on f4. Knight goes to e5 to block it. A mistake, says the computer, gives me an advantage of 3.66. I want to exchange knights. I don't want any of his pieces started coming towards me. I want to be the only one attacking. So I take the knight. And of course, he takes back. He has two ways to take it, either with the D or with the F pawn. He took it with the D's, I think, in order to avoid, to get rid of the double pawns. The computer would prefer the other way around. It's a small difference. I already have quite a significant advantage of 3.73, even though materially we are still equal. The queen now goes to c6 and threatens the pawn at c2. In accuracy, the computer would rather have my queen on c5, but the idea is the same. I'm threatening on c2. Knight goes to f3. And now I have two ways to take the c2, either with the knight or with the queen. I was afraid if I took with the knight, rook goes to c1, and then I might lose my knight because it is pinned against my queen. I was also hoping at some point, what if the knight here went away, then the bishop would check and have a skewer for the queen. But let's take the pawn. Well, we'll see can do it, and the surest way, the safest way to do it is with the queen. A mistake for the computer. I didn't like it too much, but I felt that at least now I'll be sure a nice pawn ahead. Takes it, I take it, and threaten the rook. Rook goes to c1. Knight goes to b4. And I was afraid that, yes, nice, I got the pawn, but you take the pawn at c7. I would take perhaps the pawn at a2. He would take the pawn at b7, and who knows what. But there was another threat in addition to that. The threat is about this pawn on d3. The bishop can take with check. He places his thing on d2. At least it's not going to be a check. And now also the bishop defends the pawn at d3, so I cannot take any longer. What I want to do is at least save my pawn on c7. I decide with the knight, if I moved it with the pawn, then the knight could be attacked, and it would have only the a6 square to go, and not a6, I mean, and not e to go back, because this is going to be attacked. Here it is not safe. Go back all the way, block the rook. That's why I send my knight to c6. Pawn goes to a3, so my knight cannot go back to b4. Mistake for the computer, I believe, although it has a purpose, it is a waste of a move because I wasn't planning to put my knight back to b4. Rook goes now to c8, so I can move my knight without having my c7 pawn in danger. Inaccuracy is the computer. My advantage from being more than 3 pawns is now down to almost half of a pawn. And Suriyan moves his pawn to h3, blocks my bishop going to g4. In fact, his king is so exposed, there is no danger of backrank mate. Knight goes to a5 and threatens a nice fork on b3. Not only get the pawn, but also I am going to win the rook. And Suriyan stops it by placing his rook on b1. And now I start pushing my c pawn. Let's see how far can we take it. I take to c5, can go to c4. Perhaps I can get rid of his 2 pawns on b3 and d3, and my attack will become even stronger. And Suriyan is trying to counterplay in the other side, attacks my bishop, that gives only 1 square to go to g6. Computer says it's a great move, but of course it's the best possible move, but my bishop got nowhere else to go. I don't understand why it says it is the best. In addition, by saving it here, if Suriyan, for any reason, moves his d pawn from d3 to d4, I'm winning the rook. His knight goes to h4. He wants to exchange with the bishop, so now his bishop opponent d3 is free to move. Computer doesn't like it. And I continue my attack. Pawn goes from c5 to c4. Now he takes my bishop. I take it back, but by doing so, I open the line for my rook. Yes, I missed a chance of winning the rook if this pawn on d3 disappears, but I'm opening the line for my rook. The computer thinks inaccuracy would rather have, the computer would rather have me do the intermediate move, the pawn at c3 check, and then win it. Yes, that's what the computer would like. It's not that the h pawn was better, but if I do the first check and then the f pawn, that would have been slightly better. Suriyan is attacking my knight. A mistake for the computer. And my knight goes to b3 check. Of course, Suriyan cannot take it because then my pawn will take his rook. That is why the king goes to d3. Excuse me, to e3. Now continue my attack. Pawn goes to d4 check. King, at that moment, Suriyan really thought that it was made. It's not, but no, I'm sorry. This happened a move later. But really, his condition is much worse. Suriyan stands his knight on e4. It doesn't matter where he stands it. E4 or f3, I still have the same poke, and I win the rook. At that point, really, it is when Suriyan told me that he thought it was checkmate, and but after looking carefully, we both realized, and I knew it before that, there is no checkmate because he can take my pawn on d4. But that does not change the result too much. Now I'm taking the rook at b1, and I have an advantage of 6.20. And at this point, Suriyan resigned, and they started with a nice win with black pieces against a player with a higher rate than me. But let's see now what the computer has to say. Let's look at the review. I had 78.6 accuracy versus 68.9. I played for a level of 1950, quite above my skill of 1579. And Suriyan played just below his rating, 1600 compared to 1620 that his rating. And let's see how did we do the various categories. Nobody had a brilliant move. I had a great, but the great move I had, I don't think it was so great. This was the only square where my bishop could escape. Best, 12 versus 6 for me. Excellent, 4 for Suriyan, 3 for me. Good, 5 versus 3 for Suriyan. Book moves, 2 move each of us. Inaccuracies, now the negative categories. 3 for Suriyan, 2 for me. 7 mistakes for Suriyan, 2 for me. Misses. I missed 3 times, but Suriyan had no misses, and none of us had any blunders. And thus I start the tournament with a win, especially a nice win against a player that was higher rated than me. Wonderful beginning, but how did we do the next 2 rounds? You'll have to watch the other 2 videos. And once again, thanks for watching. Thanks to all of my subscribers. If you have not yet subscribed, you may want to click the subscribe button. Doesn't take too much from you, just a moment of your time. And if you want to leave any comments, I'll be glad to read them. Most of you have written some very nice and positive, encouraging comments in the past. Thank you very much for that. Once again, I am Harry Lausaniziris. This is Greco Chess with the 81st Chessanity Tournament. That's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. Goodbye.